National Review has released a statement absolutely torching President Donald Trump for doing what they're calling yammering about kids and dolls for a man that's never had to make do with less. I'm Max Lopez. This is the Blue Wave. Please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Donald Trump has rustled American consumers' feathers in recent days after on Sunday evening, he did an interview with NBC News' Kristen Welker, where he essentially summed up the entirety of American consumer anxiety at the moment as children going from having to go from playing with 40 plus dolls to having to make do with 2 dolls. These comments show how out of touch Donald Trump is with your family's struggle making ends meet in the United States of America, and really just shows how unrepresentative his administration and his line of thinking is of the vast majority of Americans in this country. So let's head on over here to good old Mediaite, where we have an article that says National Review torches Trump for yammering about dolls and spoiled kids. He never had to make do with less. In recent days, Trump has defended his sweeping implementation of tariffs by suggesting that the consequences of his policies might be that the children will have 2 dolls instead of 30 dolls, and maybe the 2 dolls will cost a couple of more bucks than they would normally. They don't need to have 30 dolls, they can have 3. They don't need to have 250 pencils, they can have 5, he remarked in another instance. Bizarrely, the man who for decades has been a symbol of unapologetic American excess is now defending his tariff policies by making a case against abundance, observed the conservative magazine, which chided the president for telling parents what their kids do and do not need. Beyond that, the central justification for Trump's tariffs has been populist argument that free trade only benefits wealthy Wall Streeters at the expense of lower income Americans. But it isn't the super rich who will have problems buying things for their children under Trump's tariff regime, but rather families who rely on access to cheaper goods to be able to afford any sort of toys or other goods for their children, continued the editorial. It's hard to think of a greater gift to Democrats during a chaotic and expensive Christmas shopping season than footage of Trump, who never faced the prospect as either a child or a parent of having to make do with less, yammering about American children being spoiled. And it talks about Trump's approval ratings dropping since Liberation Day. Americans don't want to be told, don't worry, this is all going to be all right. You're just going to have to make do with less. It's absolutely tone deaf for a country that has 60% of its citizens living paycheck to paycheck, with most families having $1,000 or less in their savings account. It's absolutely tone deaf. And Abby Phillips here, I think, absolutely nails the crux of why it's absolutely tone deaf. And I'll go ahead and play you guys this clip here from Mediaite.
If you go into a broke person's house, that floor is littered with broken toys from the dollar store.
So now we're shaming people for being
Barbie shaming. Is the opportunity to make enough money to make the same decisions that every rich person is already making and keeping the cheap toys away from their kids. And the people braying the loudest about this are the people who would never let their kids buy those crappy toys. And it is so offensive to me because when you talk to working class people, they sound just like the president. They would love to be buying high quality stuff for their kids instead of 1,000 cheap things that are going to break immediately because that's what they can afford.
That's the worst defense of Donald Trump, because China makes 80% of all toys sold in this country and 90% of all Christmas goods sold in this country. We have a lot of leverage with China. The Christmas in the doll industry is not one of them. When you start rationing dolls for American people, you're losing the argument. It's giving Scrooge vibes.
Is it a good thing that we're so dependent on China for anything?
It's not a good thing or bad.
But you're passionately arguing for it.
It's not, what I'm saying is that he's losing the argument because this idea of like, oh, we can buy American girl dolls and all of us will be just so happy. Well, 80% of all toys,
Can I offer another look at this, Batya? Hold on a second. Let's think about this like for real. Like people who really don't have a lot of money, here's what they're really thinking. They're not thinking, I want to buy the most expensive doll for my child. They're thinking, I want to buy a doll for my child so that I can also afford food. I can also afford clothes. I can also afford to send them to school. So the idea that the whole thing is about buying more and more expensive goods, that seems to completely miss the point about what's happening in terms of people who are actually struggling in this country.
Right. It does. It completely misses the point of people having access to goods, cheap goods, is better than having no access to those goods at all, or having things taken off your plate in other places to be able to afford or live the same sort of lifestyle that you were used to living as before. This argument is totally drenched in this elitist attitude that we can just get by with less. And it is totally tone deaf, because what you're having out here with Donald Trump's tariffs, it's going to cause American families across the country to have to make decisions about what they can afford versus what they cannot afford. And 80% of all toys are made in China, not just dolls, right? So this is becoming, when it boils down to it, what American consumers are faced with is, it's not a question of, oh, well, now I guess I'm going to have to go and buy a more expensive doll that's made in America instead of all these cheap Chinese dolls. It's really not that simple. It's a matter of, am I going to be able to afford any presents or any sort of toys for my kid whatsoever? Not a question of, am I going to be able to afford cheap Chinese dolls, or am I going to be able to afford expensive American Girl dolls? It's just such a backwards way of looking at what's going down, right? What we're having here is free time taken off of Americans' tables, right? Picnics, vacations, time with family, having some money to be able to go and eat out, having any sort of recreation or any sort of hobbies or any sort of interests outside of the 9-to-5 work grind is being taken away from Americans. And the American people are not happy with it. Donald Trump and his administration can try to spin it which way that they want to, but the American people do not have the wool pulled over their eyes, and it's certainly being reflected in Donald Trump's approval rating, which has plummeted ever since these tariffs have been announced. And I don't think that there is really any grand strategy here or through line of policy that the Trump administration and Trump himself is following. It's basically that Donald Trump truly believes that tariffs are the way to go forward, and any sort of fallout that lower and middle income Americans have to shoulder, so what? Right? It's not him. It's not his billionaire buddies that are going to be having to take other things off their table because of the result of these tariffs. So, you know, this is the America we live in. We live in an oligarchy where we have a president of the United States of America who is a multi-billionaire who is telling you and your family, you don't have to worry about the effects of these tariffs, because don't worry about it. You can go ahead and have less dolls and less pencils. And let's not forget, this is a man who made one of his core messages of his campaign lowering prices on day one. On day one. Prices have not lowered. They did not lower on day one. They have not lowered in month 3. They have gone up. And they are going to continue to go up as Donald Trump's disastrous trade tariff policy continues to pummel this country. And we can only hope that this turns into political backlash against the MAGA Republicans and their agenda in the 2026 midterm elections, which I think that we are already seeing some evidence of that happening with these different elections that have happened in America since Donald Trump has become president. And certainly with Mark Carney, the liberal in Canada, winning the election for prime minister, largely on the back of backlash against Donald Trump and him saying crazy stuff like he's going to annex the country into being the 51st state. So I think that there are positive signs that we're looking at, that the American people and the world is not tolerating Donald Trump bullying it around. And let's only hope that American voters are galvanized to hand the majority of the House of Representatives back to the Democrats in the 2026 election, and we can have a blue wave that ultimately gets politicians in Washington that represents actual struggles and the plight of the vast majority of the American people. That's all I got for you guys in this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like the video and subscribe. Take care.